Now, to Queensland. And the lie that has been put in front of Queenslanders and the rest of the country, we called it last night, it was proven absolutely true today. The lie put forward by the Queensland government that apparently they're simultaneously good enough that they can organise an Olympic Games, but they can't book a couple of hundred extra hotel rooms for quarantine.
We are scrambling for hotels, and this has got to stop. It's too much pressure, so we have to put a pause. It's putting our workers at risk, and it's also putting our community at risk as well.
Now, the announcement that was made meant that people who were moving to Queensland after you had filled out all the forms and done all of the things to meet the ridiculously high bar of being able to get into Queensland, who were literally at the airport yesterday, including this woman who was in Melbourne yesterday, literally ready to board a flight to go to the place she is planning to live. She has no home left in Melbourne. She has no possessions left in Melbourne. Instead, it's all been packed up and it's all been sent. She is one of a collection of people, including people with kids, relatives, all the rest of it, who were told that even if you actually got to Queensland, you didn't just have to turn around and go home, you had to buy a ticket to turn around and go home. These people are the victims of Palaszczuk's politics. Most people in Queensland couldn't give a shit because it's not them. But here's the truth. This is your fellow Australian. The idea that the hotel system was apparently getting so close to bursting point that people were given just a couple of hours' notice before the system was turned off is garbage. If they knew that was the case, they would have been hinting at it. They would have been putting out numbers. They would have been starting to send messages to people like Maddie, don't go to the airport. But instead, it was all politics. Because it's been a week where the country has started to feel like there is light at the end of the tunnel. I'm sad to say tonight, as a result of what I've told you out of New South Wales, that light is a little further than we thought it was going to be. That's heartbreaking. But because it was a positive week, particularly for the federal government being able to talk about what happens at 70 and 80%, the Queensland government is playing its part as the federal opposition leader, doing its part to play spoiler. And magically, today, 24 hours after making that announcement yesterday, this was the surprise announcement from the Queensland government.
Queenslanders want this centre utilised. I have listened to Queenslanders. I know how much they support a regional quarantine facility to be in Queensland. They want their community kept safe.
Now, of course, people who go into quarantine, particularly from overseas, they end up going into Brisbane hotels because there's this thing called Brisbane Airport where international flights land. There's an idea that the Queensland government has been obsessed with for some time, which is to build a quarantine facility in Toowoomba. Apart from anything else, it's a Liberal seat, so it doesn't matter. But what about this? So literally yesterday was the day where they made the announcement that room is full. Today, they literally had the bulldozers there to start to build a project. Now, anyone who has ever dealt with government knows nothing is approved that quickly. No works can start within a day, which means they knew this was coming, which means yesterday's announcement was a lie. It was a lie so they could play this politics. Politics where people like Maddie went to an airport ready to go into hotel quarantine and then start a new life in Queensland. But they can just get stuffed because the greater importance to the Queensland government is the politics of the federal election. Just like how they say get stuffed to the woman who had twins, wanted to cross the border, but out of fear, ended up having to wait and go to Sydney and lost one of her twins. Who cares? Just like the family where a mum and dad wasn't able to cross the border to be able to be with their little baby in the first couple of hours of their life because, of course, they were from regional New South Wales that had 0 cases. Now, I love Queensland. I really do. If I could have the blood transfusions to be a Queenslander, I would. But this is garbage. And by the way, could somebody please explain to me how this system is going to work? Because presumably, international flights will still keep landing at Brisbane Airport, which means what? Potentially COVID-positive, evil Australians coming back from overseas Well, they would have to get in a bus that would then travel from Brisbane, Ipswich, Toowoomba. The people who work in this facility, would they live in Toowoomba or would they be going back to their homes in Brisbane? There's no plan and there's no way that they could compel airlines to land at this particular airport. But who cares, right? Just like the lady who had to turn around to no home in Melbourne, or the lady who lost her baby, or the family who don't get to be together for a funeral. Oh, who cares, right? This is garbage. It is politics at its lowest possible form. To block people yesterday, to have a press opportunity today, and just to underline the fact that this is all political, I'll let her say it for herself.
So we'll be continuing those discussions with the federal government, but we can bus people from Brisbane up here if we have to. But I think, it's a no-brainer. Here's the airport. Send the flights in here. It's safe.
Does the Prime Minister know?
Sorry?
Does the Prime Minister know about this announcement this morning?
Quite sure he does now.
Hence why Barnaby Joyce, who's the aviation minister, pointed out the obvious idiocy. The Brisbane airport infrastructure that is required to get international flights in and out exists for a reason. And as beautiful as that little airport is in Toowoomba, it ain't Brisbane Airport.
I know very little about much, but I know a lot about politics. And I can tell you right now, if you're banging on about keeping people locked up in their house, mothers locked up in their houses, if you're being part of that process, no matter what side of the border it affects, you're on the wrong side of history, and people are going to say the only job you have now is to work to a process of giving Australia back the liberties and freedoms that all the people who voted for you were born with.
Correct. Meantime, we learned today from doctors in southeast Queensland that they think somebody is going to die in a hospital in Queensland because more than 100 medical workers aren't able to cross the border. They live in far northern New South Wales that has duck egg 0, nothing COVID. She's not keeping you safe. She's scaring you to change your vote. The only thing that kind of made me smile out of Queensland news today was a Sheila who thought that she could somehow smuggle herself across the border by hiding in a boot of a car on the back of a truck.
Jump out, mate. There's someone in the back here, mate. Jump out. Are you the only one in there? I'm going to be nice to you. There's no need to be rude. I've just asked you to hop out.
Apparently she didn't know that you weren't allowed to cross the border.